All right. Good evening, everybody. I am glad you are able to join us in the Prince George's County Historical Society's October History Chat. We are recording the conversation and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel. I am Donna Schneider, President of the Historical Society. We would appreciate it if you would mute your microphones. We will be answering questions at the end of the chat, so please enter your questions in the chat box, and we will get to as many of your questions as possible at the end. Tonight, Dr. Julie Rose, Director of the Marietta House Museum, will be chatting with Stacey Hawkins, who is also the Society historian, or Society Secretary, as well as working at the Marietta House Museum. And she will talk to Dr. Rose, and they will discuss the Giving Voices initiative at Marietta, which is giving voices to the silenced and marginalized people who lived and worked at Marietta during the life of Judge Gabriel Duval and his descendants. The Giving Voice consists of a reinterpretation of the historic home and grounds, as well as reaching out to the community for their input and engagement and interactive participation with partner organizations. So Stacey, over to you and Julie.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Donna, very much. And Dr. Rose, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We truly appreciate you speaking with us. And you have a teaching background and come to us from other museums. And so if you would, please tell us a little bit about yourself and about Magnolia Mound in Louisiana and also at Homewood in Baltimore and your experiences with the Giving Voice in a form in those museums as well.
Sure. Thanks, Stacey. And please call me Julie. That'd be great. Stacey and I work together here at Marietta House Museum. I've had the pleasure of being here at Marietta since June of 2020. So I've made my 1-year mark, and it's been a very exciting first year. Prior to coming to Marietta, I was the director curator at Homewood Museum at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And there we worked on a similar project in terms of pivoting the historical interpretation from a white-centric focus on the tour of the white family who owned the historic site at the time, and giving voice to the enslaved population that lived and labored at that place. Prior to that, I was the director at West Baton Rouge Museum in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we had a wonderful campus of 9 buildings that looked at sugar plantation history. And we had a focus on Allendale Plantation. And that was a similar project. While that plantation didn't survive anymore, 4 of the buildings were moved from the plantation site to our campus at West Baton Rouge. And then we added additional buildings to help describe the community of 19th century sugar plantations in South Louisiana, with a focus on the enslaved population. And then, of course, prior to that, you had mentioned Magnolia Mound. Magnolia Mound Plantation is located in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And that was a wonderful experience to be able to be the museum educator there, because they had just installed a saved slave cabin from Point Coupee Parish. And it was the site where the famous American author Ernest Gaines lived in Point Coupee Parish in a town called False River. In fact, several of his stories use the plantation from Point Coupee as the setting and his experiences in that town to help fill the stories in some of his novels. Well, I'm going to share a picture with you of Magnolia, if that's okay, Stacey. I was going to share a picture that I have in this
absolutely, thank you.
PowerPoint. Sure. And it's going to be this slide right here. So let me go ahead and enter that. And we are going to look at this slide right here. Let's see if we can get that right here. This is the picture of Magnolia Mound Plantation right here. And that is the cabin that was brought from Point Coupee Parish. And they actually brought two cabins and they cannibalized one of them in order to build a whole one here. And it's still here today. This goes back to 1998. And this cabin was then to represent the slave quarter on the sugar plantation that was the home and property of the Duplantier family, which is right outside of downtown Baton Rouge. And in this picture, you can see this is the back of the big house. Big house is the term that's referred to as the manor house or the main house. In the mid-Atlantic, I'm finding that big house is not as popular a term, but in South Louisiana, big house is very common. And this is a view of back of the big house. And so that slave cabin representing the quarter was in the background. This image to the right is the interior of that cabin, which had two rooms. And then this is below is a historical illustration of what life might have been like inside that space for the enslaved family. So that was in a nutshell, so a little bit about my background. I enjoyed my time at Baltimore. The Homewood Museum was a wonderful experience. And it was more of a country home than it was a plantation. And yet there was still a rather large domestic enslaved community held by the Carroll family at that site. And that was my jumping off point to come here, to join you all here in Prince George's County.
And I would like to ask, you had a revised inclusive tour at Homewood. How was that received by the public in Baltimore?
That's a great question. We called that tour Families at Homewood. Before I got there, they had gotten a wonderful grant to fund research and then to revise the tour and the historical interpretation at Homewood. So this predates my coming there. And they hired a scholar, her name is Dr. Abby Schreiber, to actually do the research to systematically record and document the enslaved population that would be part of the story at Homewood. Homewood was the country house of Charles and Harriet Carroll, the son and daughter-in-law of Charles Carroll of Carrollton, one of the signers from Maryland of the Declaration of Independence. And his son doesn't have any real notoriety for his own credit, but he was very wealthy because of his father. And that was much of what the story was about at Homewood. And so what Abby was able to do was to document a good portion of the story. I was hired to come and then use that data, that historical information, and help the community rethink how this house can be used to represent or reflect the lives of the people who lived there who were enslaved. And so what I was able to do, and it was very exciting, is engage the community, the Baltimore community, as well as the university community, in small focus groups, in surveys, in conversations, a variety of different ways to talk about the potential for how this site could be interpreted. And what we came up with was focus on the families. And so we looked at specifically two families, the Ross family and the Connor family, and it was their voice that we used, and then the architecture itself, to propel the tour through the house and how those spaces were viewed by the enslaved mother, father, daughter, son, sometimes a single mother, sometimes a married mother, and those stories of crises and affliction, and yet triumphs and achievement as well. So it was hopefully, a well-rounded, diverse collection of stories, but the key was to be accurate and to be willing to take some risks and be brave to tell some stories that could be painful for some of our visitors. And it did really well. And I say that because we got a very nice response from the community. The university was pleased. as well as I think it's called Baltimore Magazine, gave Homewood an award as the best museum for 2019. So that was very exciting. And we also won an award from Baltimore Heritage LLC, also for the work we did there. So it seems to have really been a successful effort to pivot the story away from the carols, but not to the exclusion of the carols, but it was an integrated story, because that in many ways is a more accurate history to show it as an integrated space.
And we're to, springboard with that and have our Giving Voice initiative here at Marietta. We're very much looking forward to it. And I know the community is looking forward to it too, and being active and involved. And so could you please tell us a bit about that as well?
Certainly. Yeah, so the Giving Voice initiative also predates me. The division that we are a part of here at Parks and Rec, and the Prince George's County Parks and Rec division that Marietta falls into, is called Natural and Historical Resources Division. And Omar Eaton Martinez and Christine Fanning wanted to be thinking about how the historic sites under their purview could be used for social justice education. So be more than documenting the history of the 18th and 19th centuries here in the county, which is very important, but to broaden the impact of what these houses could be doing, what these historic sites could be doing for social good. And that's where the Giving Voice initiative got started. And I was hired to help think through the channels that are available to us through history, through public history, to make that happen. And what we've been able to do, this is still very new and very much in its infancy, so I'm really, really appreciative of Stacey and Donna and John and so many members here in the immediate community in Prince George's County, as Susan Pearl, of course, people who have really shown an interest, Nathaniel Miles, a real deep interest in what more can we do with this, is the history that's contained in these spaces. And so we have developed an advisory committee. Right now it's 25 people, and we're happy to include more people to be able to have conversations, these one-on-one conversations. We, of course, because of COVID, a lot of these conversations happen on Zoom, but not to any disadvantage, really. We've been making some really wonderful, I think some really wonderful progress in developing what the site can be. So the advisory committee has developed a mission statement now that we are part of the Giving Voice initiative, which is about elevating and expanding the historical presence of the enslaved population with the purpose of relating the legacy of slavery and African-American history to present day. So why does this matter today? Why should we send school groups to Marietta to learn about American history more than to be able to recite the facts? What the facts of American Revolution, the facts of the War of 1812, the facts of how the Supreme Court justice system is evolved. So many really wonderful stories, but what can we do for social betterment? And so if I may, Stacey, I thought it'd be okay to share the mission statement that the advisory committee so generously helped draft, and it was adopted, and NERD, our division, is very much supportive of the work that we're doing, and they're really pleased with this direction that the community has helped us develop. So just take a quick second, and I'm going to read to you the new Marietta mission statement, which was accepted on April 19th, 2021. And it goes like this. Marietta House Museum is dedicated to exploring, elevating, and transforming awareness of the interconnected relationships of the people and their descendants who lived and labored at Marietta. As a public history steward, Marietta is committed to co-curating discussions, exhibitions, and programs with broad community input to promote universal social equity. Marietta interprets the historical architecture and landscape across Prince George's County, Maryland, through inclusive American history. So that is where we are, and that is our touchstone. in everything that we're doing in terms of developing our visitor experience, in terms of our restoration choices, in terms of our current research choices.
Thank you so much. And with that, I have a couple questions about that. And one is, in your museum workshops, you discuss using tensions in a positive way and say that tensions are raised through difficult history, representations, and interpretation promote problem solving and critical thinking. And how will you use this at Marietta and within the community?
Yeah. So I've written a book that Stacey's referring to called Interpreting Difficult Histories. This is actually her copy. I stole it from her office because I gave mine to a student who's using it this week. And this book called Interpreting Difficult Histories at Historic Sites and Museums, it's been out for a little while now. It came out 2016 or so. What I was really interested in doing is thinking through. Initially, I wanted to think through why are so many of the historical plantation museums around the country, why were they in the early 2000s, certainly when I came on the scene, in the museum scene, not talking about slavery. And so many people offered a lot of explanations. And after doing some hard thinking and some research into educational psychology, really what came to the fore, Stacey, is this idea of the tension and the angst about talking about slavery. It's very uncomfortable. It's frightening for some people. It's upsetting. It's certainly painful for some visitors. So this idea of difficult history, well, it's not just focused on slavery history. It includes any history that gives people discomfort, gives people pain. It's this idea that histories can be shocking, unnerving, and even giving you an opportunity to say, I don't want to deal with this, and just foreclose and not deal with it at all. And that is really the least favored option, because when silenced histories, when people opt to silence a history, then there's forgetting, and then forgetting that history, then we don't understand our present day situation. We don't understand our current social dilemmas and crises. And so at an individual level, Stacey, to answer your question about tensions and crises, at an individual level, when a visitor is going through a museum, let's say it's a Holocaust museum, a plantation museum where slavery took place, enslavement took place, a visitor can feel very uncomfortable and for a moment really have to wrap their head around what they're hearing about some of the violence and some of the oppression imposed on others, the wickedness. And in that moment, the visitor needs to be thinking through how this makes sense. How does this make how I will understand the world now? It's new information that changes how I understand good and evil. It's how I understand a part of American history. And it is our job as public historians to provide information skillfully and tactfully and respectfully in such a way that we move visitors past this idea of the angst and discomfort, what I call resistance, to a part where they become reflective and can reconsider engaging in a history that had otherwise caused them that discomfort. So it's in that learning crisis, in that difficult moment, that the visitor is taking in new information that could potentially change how he or she engages in the world. That's a great question.
And I love that answer. And along with that, Julie, when you talk about the tensions and giving the tours, reading your book, it's a great book, I will say, for anyone who would like to purchase it. It really is, very inclusive and covers so many situations and so many workshops. And you ask a few questions, and two of the questions you asked for museum staff to think about who are you telling this story to, and what is the purpose and expected outcome of telling the story. And so with that, how would you go about, how are we going about attracting the who here to Marietta?
Right. So knowing your audience is knowing your purpose. So I had read our mission statement, which is a really, again, to circle back to that touchstone. Knowing what you're going to research is really important, but then figuring out how to deliver the information that's purposeful and productive. Those are two key directives that public historians take really seriously and really move us into shaping our presentations and shaping our interpretation, which is another word for the experience that we are designing for visitors when they come to our places. They could be gallery museums, a history museum like American History on the Mall, or a historic site museum where there's a building and landscape like Marietta. We need to be purposeful and productive. So not to focus on what could appear esoteric, not to be especially academic to the point where it's not engaging. It needs to be your interpretation has to also be directed to a particular audience. So knowing who you're going to be talking to is really going to shape how you're going to deliver it. From as simple as knowing that you have a specific story that has to be told. And here at Marietta, we feel it's really important to be able to tell the story of the families and individuals who were enslaved here in the 19th century. I see Chris is here, so I'm going to say also the part of the 18th century to be particularly specific. But we need to be able to tell the stories in such a way that they relate to what's happening today in the 21st century and what relates to what's happening here in Prince George's County and in Maryland, so that we understand that these stories and these histories are what our present day is built upon. And so those are some of the guiding factors that we're taking into consideration as we're developing the tour experience and the historic preservation here at Marietta. So the who, and that's where the advisory committee is really important, because we've had one listening session, I think, with this group, which was fantastic, and I really appreciate it. And some very good ideas came to the top. And we need to continue having those kinds of listening sessions to identify the who. We hopefully will encourage people to visit us and see this site as meaningful and significant, and hopefully encourage a kind of empathy for the historical characters to such a point that it becomes something called active empathy. Active empathy means that not only did the visitor learn something about this space and felt something for the historical persons they learned about, but now they want to know more. And that's the active part. The question becomes, where can I read more about this? What are some of the answers that I'm desperate to find out? Where can I buy books about this? And even more so, how does this new information change the way I think about my community or my relationship to my community? For example, active empathy could impact how someone decides to vote. It could impact how someone decides to enroll in a school or to take a course. It could impact who that person wants to socialize with or not socialize with. It really can be so transformational to engage. And I'm talking to people who are truly interested in history, which is so I have this sense of community already by seeing some of the names that are here, that we recognize the power of history and to be able to really target it to specific groups. One of the groups that came from the listening session, Stacey, that we had with the Historical Society was educators, that we should focus some of our programming and experiences for people who teach, which is a fantastic idea. We also recognize that we want to engage with families. So multi-generational groups is another target audience for us. So without committing tonight to all the things that we want to do, because we want to do this carefully, as I said, purposefully and productively, that we are designing programs that are engaging and something that the visitor then takes something away with. It's not just a box I checked, oh yeah, I was there, meh. It was, I was there and now I want to know more.
And we are seeing quite a bit of interest too on the tours, with a number of people who would like to be part of the focus groups. That we're starting to have a list here for that. So we look forward to having more on the list. And Julie, would you also tell them a little bit more about it will have a year with the Giving Voice Initiative, and so April will be kind of the year anniversary. If you want to, kind of a sneak peek
Sure.
for our historical society.
Yeah. So we've been busy. We've got a lot of great stuff going on and a lot of interesting projects underway. We also wrote a vision statement, and our vision for this place called Marietta House, is a community-driven historic site committed to nurturing social justice and advocacy through understanding current social inequities and their historical origins. So how do we do that? Well, we are developing a visitor's experience based on some phenomenal research that's going on right now. We are working closely with Christopher Milko and Maddie McCoy, Kate Brott, our on-site historian, and Stacey, myself. We have some interns. We're including Ryan Ellis and Edward Torres Lopez, among others. We are documenting the enslaved community really thoroughly. Our predecessors from the past 30 years have collected a tremendous amount of really valuable information. And what we're doing now is sifting through so much of that and going back to the archives to expand what we have in order to document in a much more robust way the enslaved population that was here, and where the stories that are coming to the fore are very exciting. I can share with you, for example, that we now know that on Marietta, there were at least three households here, all of which had enslaved people. And they were all Duvall families. And Judge Duvall was in Marietta House with Jane Duvall. And there were multiple enslaved people here, up to 39 enslaved people, roughly 40 persons a year, who were just part of Marietta. There's Wigwam, which also had an enslaved community. And then there's the old house. And that house, and that's just the current sort of placeholder for that structure, but that's where Ben Duvall likely he lived, and that's likely the house where Duvall grew up, with his multiple brothers and sisters, and his older his sisters, Sarah and Delilah, were there too during the time period that we're interpreting. We're looking really primarily 20s, 30s, and 40s. We do go, a few decades in either direction, but for right now, at the moment, this is what we're focusing on. And we do go to the Civil War for the tour. But my point there is that we found out that Sarah and Delilah manumitted some slaves, and that Judge Duvall was the lawyer who did the paperwork for that. And that's really pretty fascinating. One enslaved family purchased their freedom. Another family that Delilah Duvall manumitted, and Jane, and I believe it was Sarah Duvall, left in her will the freedom for a woman and her children, but not her husband. So I believe it's the Black and the Buchanan family that comes to mind. So super interesting stories like that are just another layer of complexity about what was happening at this place. We've learned a lot about the Butler family as well, Sarah and Thomas Butler, and their children and their grandchildren were here, and they won their freedom in court. They sued the Judge Duval in court, in DC court, and won their freedom in 1831. So there's a variety of stories that we're going to be telling on our tours through the eyes of how the law protected slavery, and how the enslaved learned and practiced navigating those laws and those obstructions to their finding freedom. So we have a lot to work with, and it's been very exciting. In fact, today we started shooting our orientation video. We're very much looking for people who we're looking in particular, some people who would be interested in reciting the preamble to the United States Constitution, which is going to be the opening scene for this film. So if you or anybody you know is interested in acting, we have a gig. So we did start filming today. It was a gorgeous day out, so that worked out great. We are using a local film company. Chalet Hainsworth is the videographer and production, the director, and she is here in Bowie. So I'm delighted to know that we're using a homegrown group that's making our orientation video. We are also working with an actress, a woman named Shamika Berry, who is an excellent interpreter. She works at Akakit interpretation site, and she is going to be filmed as well, and we're going to have her as reenacting particular enslaved woman named Seneca, and her life in various stages when she was here at Marietta will be also part of the tour throughout the building. So we have a lot of really interesting technology tools that we're using, some interesting, just good standard historical preservation tools that we're using. And then, of course, we have the storytelling. So we hope in the coming months to be able to start recruiting people interested in docenting who would be excited as much as we are in helping tell some of the stories here at Marietta. So we hope that that's also something that is on the horizon in the near future. So we have a lot of very exciting things happening. Some of you who are here tonight with us may be receiving the newsletter. We put out a monthly newsletter that's hopefully keeping you up to date and helping you keep track of some of the activities that are going on here, from expanding our collection so that the house is furnished, hopefully fully furnished, with lots of the details, a lot of the personal items that will be throughout the house to show free and enslaved people in these spaces, the Duvals and Seneca and her family, and the Butler and their family, and the Brown and their family. So we're hoping that this place becomes very much a part of exploration through the visit. You know what I didn't answer, Stacey? I didn't get to tell them about the Giving Voice launch that we did in April. Is this a good time to share that?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Sure. Last April, we launched the Giving Voice Initiative and invited two wonderful women to speak, and it was wonderful. We made it available for free through Facebook because at that time in April, we still weren't able to host people in person here. And Dr. Betty Kearse was the author of The Other Madisons, the Black family of James Madison. And she had done a personal family journey because she, as a Black woman, knew from her family, stories handed down generation after generation, that her family is descended from James Madison. And so she was able to share her story. And it was an opportunity for us to show how descendancy is going to be a very big, hopefully, a part of what we're doing here at Marietta. And she did a beautiful job. And it's a wonderful book if you're interested in the topic. And then Melanie Adams was our MC. She did the interview for us. And then we got to see a preview of a film of the Other Madisons that Dr. Kearse had produced, that tells the story through the Monticello lens, the family excuse me, Montpelier lens, where James Madison enslaved her ancestors. So that was really exciting. This year, we're going to do now the second annual Giving Voice event. It will also be in April. And just give you guys a sneak preview is that we have Christopher Milko, Kate Brott, and Maddie McCoy, who are going to reveal some of the fascinating stories that they've uncovered in their research in a multitude of repositories and archives. So we're very excited about that, and hopefully you'll be able to join us then as well. It'll probably be a hybrid event where we'll have an in-person component and we'll continue doing things online. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you. And yes, we're all looking forward to that very much. And when you were talking about the different resources, Julie, one of the things that we use a lot here is the archaeology. We have an archaeology lab within our nerd division. And so there were a number of digs that were here at Marietta that has helped us with our stories, but also expanded the stories to the Indigenous peoples. And so a few items have been found that belonged here at Marietta in hundreds of years ago. And so we just had the launch for our Indigenous Peoples Garden that we recently had an opening ceremony for. So could you please tell us a bit more about how that came about?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And while I do that, I'll see if I can find a nice picture of it. Yeah, so as part of giving voice, it's very important for us to be really conscientious, or hopefully be very conscientious about being inclusive, and know that it's the stories of the enslaved is extremely important to us, but so must be the voices of other marginalized populations. And that includes the Piscataway Conoy tribe and people who are here today, and then of course their ancestors who were on this land. The land in particular where Glendale is was hunting grounds of the Piscataway Conoy, and we as Stacey said, we dedicated a garden here to the memory of the early Piscataway Conoy people who were forced to leave this area during the early 19th century. So let's see if we can find a picture for that. What we ended up doing is our wonderful historian, let's see if I can find a good picture. Here's a good picture. I'm going to put that here and share it so you can see it. Are you able to see that?
Yes, we can see it. That's great.
Great. So this is now at the entrance of Marietta's property. So there's the parking lot that's right off of Bell Station Road. And so right after the parking lot, as you're heading towards the law office, we've installed a garden with a bench. And this was written after research done by Kate Brott. And she not only researched the story of the history of the Piscataway Conoy with Rico Newman, with his assistance, but we also reached out to other historic sites that were working on land acknowledgement or have successfully installed a land acknowledgement statement. And so we were really focused on having a statement that was brief, and yet the purpose is to help encourage people to reflect on the people that were here. And it reads like this: Marietta House Museum acknowledges the history and continued traditions of the Piscataway Conoy tribe who hunted, farmed, and lived on this land long before Marietta House was built. As we consider the history of this place, take a moment to remember the many people who were forced to leave their traditional homelands. And so with that, it helps us, as Stacey said, we found artifacts through digs from the 1990s that are indications that the Piscataway Conoy people were on this land for sure. And of course, there's a long tradition of knowing that this was lands for the Piscataway. So this is an opportunity to be inclusive in this way. Let me stop sharing that. So so that I could see you guys again. There you are. Other populations that we hope to explore will include some of the indentured people who were brought here during the 18th century and some of their stories. There's also women's history we feel strongly needs to be elevated in the storytelling here at Marietta, and also bringing it into the 21st century. Stories of war and the perspective of the people who are refugees is very important to us as well. And then to take into consideration immigration law and how that impacted over the centuries, how that impacted the face of our community, and how Marietta played potentially a role in some immigration stories as well. So there's more to come.
And with that, Julie, before we get into the questions, is there anything else that you would like to add about? I know we talk about a number of our people who come here want to make a difference. They want to get involved, and you've told a number of ways where people can get involved here, and not just at Marietta, but in history itself in various forms. And so, is there anything else that you would like to add and just kind of bring out about people going to other museums and hearing more of these stories in different ways from other sites?
Thank you, for sure. First, I definitely want to say thank you to the Prince George's County Historical Society. You've been incredibly warm and welcoming and extending a hand to this newbie to the community. So thank you for that. And your support is much, much appreciated. And I hope that we can continue to develop our working relationship. I think we have a lot to share. The Prince George's County Historical Society made a tremendous donation to us in April of this year that helped us furnish the historic house. So we are incredibly appreciative of that and recognize how much you're interested in what we're doing here. And I and everyone here at NERD truly appreciates that. I want to continue that relationship and take advantage of the incredible resources that you have and the talent set that you have as we work through these stories. And I'm hoping that we can set up more encounters to do the work. Of unraveling stories and then putting together presentations and events that really are meaningful and productive for the community at large. Yes, Stacey, you are right on with thinking about how much there is to visit in this area. There are in NERD alone, there are nature sites and multiple historic houses. So Prince George's County, I have learned, is chock full of incredibly historically preserved historic sites and nature spaces that are absolutely worth exploring. And it's through partnerships, I think, that we really can move on these missions and visions that I've shared with you. I think it's highly unlikely to accomplish such lofty goals alone. And I think there's power in number and there's power in talent. So I'm really hoping that that we can continue to develop these relationships. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Julie. And speaking on behalf of the Historical Society, we appreciate all your efforts, and we definitely can continue working together. It's been interesting to learn all about what you're looking to do, and what you just talked about right before that stole the question I had for you guys. So I don't have any other questions, and at the moment there's nothing in the chat box either. But I did want to ask something that just came up as you were talking. What other historic sites within NERD are doing something along what you're doing? I know we've gotten some new museum directors, so I'm assuming some of these other museum directors are going the social justice route like Marietta is, and exploring. So can you share anything that anybody else is working on?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, we are in great company. So Omar Eaton Martinez has made a real effort to help steer the historic sites, like you say, towards social justice education. Surratt House is now has a very strong staff. Their new director, Veronica, she came to us from Fort Monroe, where she did marvelous work there, and so she's very interested in military history, but not exclusively military history. She's very interested also in the Giving Voice initiative. So they are also working on revising how stories are told and what stories are told over at Surratt House. Maya Davis at Riversdale is also working very strongly with the Giving Voice initiative, and she has several really cool ideas. Maya Davis, and many of you know her, she had been with the Maryland State Archives for many, many years. So we're really lucky to have her because she's an incredible resource. And she and her staff are looking at repatriation history and looking at Underground Railroad history. So she's thinking about those particular angles for interpreting Riversdale and then in connecting our historic sites. So that's very exciting as well, and very creative. We have Montpelier. Director is Mary J, we call her, and because there's several Marys, and Mary and Holly, who is her assistant director. They are working on revising the tour and giving historical presence to the enslaved population that was there, held by the Snowdens, but not exclusively at the mansion property, but also at the ironworks property. So that's kind of interesting too, to look at industry, which is a very interesting twist as well. Who am I leaving out? There are 5 of us. Oh, Susan Reedy over at Darnell's Chance. Susan Reedy so we're all trying to do it in different ways, which is great. She's very interested in women's history. And so she does a wonderful job, and it continues. She's, out of all of us, I think she, with all us newbies, our years together doesn't even club close to the number of years she's been with the commission. But Susie continues to do a really neat job of looking at women's history through the African-American experience. So that's where she's at the moment focused on for Darnell's Chance. That's a great question. And it's really very exciting when we meet to hear, oh, I know who I left out, Shakia. Shakia is over at Concord, which is not open yet, but she's working closely with Dennis Doster to develop the stories there. I do believe Susan Pearl is working with Shakia rather closely. Also, they're in the similar phase that we are with the documentation of who was there. And so they're well on their way on getting that work going.
That's great. Is there an end date to this, or is this going to be an ongoing, continuous exploration for the sites?
Yeah. So, end dates make you feel really good because it's so nice to check the box. Stacey can vouch. I can move the camera and show you. I have a huge whiteboard in my office, and the best part of the day, and Stacey and I take turns wiping things off our list. So yes and no to your question. So yes, we do give ourselves target dates to get certain projects done. And but this is going to and has to be, because as you know, history is fluid, right?
Right.
So there is no end. So we're always going to be researching, we're always going to be pushing, and we also have to stay on the curve. We don't want to be left behind with what academia, what we're learning, what our colleagues are uncovering, what the archaeologists are finding, what other sites are doing for us. And because we're not there yet, but we are hoping to be able to do some descendancy interpretation and hopefully being able to reach out to the community and have people who maybe have connections through family and kinship ties through Marietta's history. But we are, so it's kind of like baby steps, I would call it, in terms of, what our goals are. So right now, our 2021 goal was, FY21 was to get the mission statement and a vision, so we'd have a touchstone to know where are we going, what are we trying to accomplish, and getting that advisory committee set up. The other part was to furnish the house, and I have to thank you guys so much for giving that fuel to get that done. And yeah, it was awesome. And I mean, of course, that's always never really done. There's always ways to improve and upgrade and so forth. But I feel like we've, there's storytelling now in every room, which is phenomenal. So I do hope you come. So this going forward, what we're working on now is the visitor tour experience. And I'm hoping that we can launch that this summer. I did give a little shout out for people interested maybe being in docents. Because we're a staff of 3 and 3.5. So we've got, and some interns who are great, but we really could use some people to help us give the tours. Because I honestly think once we get rolling, this is going to be a really popular site because the stories are so phenomenal. They really are engaging. And I think that we're going to, I think people will be really excited to come here and hear what we've uncovered. So that's for this coming year. We're really focused on the visitor experience.
Great. You had mentioned there's an advisory committee of 25, and I'm just being nosy on this question. Is it all Parks and Rec employees, or do you have outsiders of park and planning?
I'm so glad you asked that. It is all about the community, literally. And I have to give, kudos to Stacey and Omar, because I didn't know anybody, it was a very ambitious goal, but I could not have done it without those two incredible people who are so immersed into the community here. Of the 25, 10 are NERD or MNC PPC employees, and the other 15 are people from the community. And I'm really hoping we have more. NERD people are great, MNC PPC are great, because they keep us grounded and know about resources internally, which has been incredibly helpful. But it also, I really would love it to be even more community. So it's 2/3 community people, which is great. And we'd like to expand that for sure.
Okay. We still have no questions, so I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add, Julie or Stacey.
Just that you saw that wonderful, or heard that wonderful list that Julie was talking about, and so I know I speak for the rest of the staff here. They're very excited about what we have in store and all the work that we have to do, and we have a full plate, as you can see, but we do look forward to the work that needs to be done, and look forward with as Julie said, working with our different partnerships here. And so we just encourage visitation. So all of you on the call, please come and see us. We have our exhibit up in the law office, and we're very excited to be utilizing the law office again, to be able to use such an incredible outbuilding. And so we do have quite a few changes here for those who have been here before. We have quite a few changes for you to come and see and stay abreast of what's going on. And just let us know if you have any questions or would like to be added to any of our newsletter or mailing lists.
So Christopher just said no questions, but thank you for your presentation, Dr. Rose. So.
You're most welcome, Chris. I appreciate that. We are very, very excited to open the exhibit called Enlightenment versus Enslavement. That's in the law office. So when you do come visit, you'll get to enjoy that as well. And that was co-curated with Kate Broth. So thank you, Stacey, for mentioning that.
the Historical Society will be partnering again this spring, or at least in 2022, I should say, with Marietta on some of their lectures and stuff that they're planning, which that's been a great partnership for us. And we appreciate the opportunity to partner with you. And again, you're more than welcome for helping us out with a new home for some of the furniture we had available and other artifacts. So they're much better to be out in the public domain than sitting in a storage for people to not be able to see. So I greatly appreciate that you thought to think, or you thought some of the stuff we had available was worthy of adding to your collection. So
it is.
Tell your story.
We are so excited, indeed.
Now I do have to come to go see everything out and about, and being interpreted. So
it's all polished and dust, Donna. It's all.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It looks good. It looks good.
Thank you.
Really
so let's see. Lee Ryan also says thank you. This has been informative. So thank you, Lee. So with no further questions, I just wanted to thank everybody, especially Stacey and Julie, for doing our history chat tonight, and everybody for joining and supporting us. If you have enjoyed this chat, please consider becoming a member or making a donation to the Historical Society, which we are dependent on donations and memberships to keep our DeMar Library functioning and offering free events such as things like tonight's chat. Both can be done through our website, www.pghistory.org. And you can also find the link to all of our history chats through our website as well. They are on our YouTube channel, and there's a link on our website. I usually put the history chats up over the weekend, so sometime this weekend, this history chat will show up on our website. This is our last history chat for the year, basically due to the upcoming holiday season. The fourth Mondays of the month do interfere with holidays. But we will be back in 2022 on January 24th, 2022. Dr. Richard Bell will be talking about his book Stolen with our historian Susan Pearl. And we do have some exciting chats already lined up for next year. And we will preview them in our next issue of our newsletter, Then and Now, which will come out in early January. So thank you again, and good night, and see you next year.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.